What are the typical stress factors that are having a negative impact on our mental health and well-being? On the one side, there are specific causes or triggers of mental disorder such as trauma, abuse, accidents, combat, or medical causes such as brain injuries which often lead to severe forms of mental disorder. In these cases, sport and exercise can be part of the individual therapy, but this needs to be accompanied by a specialized professional. Our self-empowerment program is explicitly not a replacement for this. If you feel that this applies to you, please seek appropriate professional help. In the support section, we give some guidance on where you can get further information. On the other side, there are the general stresses of life in modern societies. This includes, for example, the multitude of competing social demands or the growing impact of social media. These factors have an impact on almost all of us. They are not considered to be specific or direct causes for mental disorder, but they can have a significant negative impact on our mental health and well-being. It is important to become aware of the impact these factors have on our personal well-being in order to be able to manage them or mitigate the negative consequences through sport and exercise, as well as other means. Let's start by looking at Maggie's thoughts for a moment. Take a few seconds to read what she thinks. Is there anything that sounds familiar to you? Anything that also causes stress in your life? Well, if you can put yourself in Maggie's shoes, it's probably because you too have to deal with the typical demands of the lifestyle of European working-age adults every day. So, what characterizes our social reality and what social and psychological needs result from it that then in turn can have a negative impact on our psychological well-being? A particular feature of modern societies is that very often we perceive time as a scarce commodity. On the one hand, this is due to the constantly growing demands that are placed on us from outside, but which we also place on ourselves. The amount of possible events constantly exceeds our personal time budget. A lot of us have the feeling that we need to become more and more efficient and manage our time better. No matter how much we work and do, there is always something that still needs to be done. In addition, our modern time structure is extremely challenging. There is acceleration. Our lives are getting faster and faster. Compression. We are doing more and more within the limited scope of our 24-hour days. A 24/7 society. Almost everything is possible at almost any time. Or desynchronization. Different social systems like work and school have decoupled time systems and are no longer aligned. These developments are significantly reinforced by digitalization and the influence of social media. In both our private and professional lives, we communicate predominantly via digital channels. As a result, we are always available everywhere and our scope of action hardly knows any spatial or temporal boundaries anymore. Social media also reinforce social comparison and constantly distract us. Many people report that they experience digital stress and a fear of missing out. In a predominantly digital world, a certain form of disembodiment is an inevitable consequence. We are less and less physically active in many areas, from work to household chores to leisure time. In a digitalized world, there are fewer opportunities to smell, taste, touch, feel things. Visual and auditory sensory stimuli dominate here. Modern European societies are increasingly individualized. This affects both the value system that each individual defines for themselves and the living conditions, which are characterized, for example, by transformed family structures, anonymous urban neighborhoods and more single households, for example. Increased levels of loneliness and friendships that are limited to social media contacts are just two of the observable consequences. Last but not least, people in Europe have experienced a level and frequency of social crises that probably surpasses anything since the Second World War. The real and perceived threats of the last decade include the international terrorist threat, the financial crisis, the war in Syria and the resulting refugee crisis, climate change, the COVID-19 pandemic and the Ukraine war, with all the consequences not yet foreseeable. All this leads to a high degree of actual or perceived uncertainty and insecurity for almost everyone. Now, take a minute or two to reflect on how much the described framework conditions apply to your own situation. Which of these factors do you personally feel to be a burden for yourself? When you are done, click on the next video, in which we take a closer look at the psychological needs that arise from this social environment.